Hi everyone, this is Diva from Blood Hunter, and you're listening to the Metal Pit podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit podcast, where we delve deep into the albums and bands that shaped metal. Please visit our website, The Metal Pit, at www.themetalpit.org, where you'll find album reviews, interviews, live show reviews. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Metal Pit. And for video interviews, video shorts, and audio versions of this podcast, please visit our YouTube channel at the Metal Pit 666. And as always, if you have any album suggestions or comments, please share with us via email at info@themetalpit.org. So I'm your host today, Billy, filling in for Blake. I'm joined by my two co-writers at the Metal Pit, Jim and Ken. How are you guys doing today, Jim, Ken?
Awesome.
Good.
Good. That made it sound like you guys are one person, Jim, Ken.
No.
But anyways, so you guys are fresh off the Manowar podcast last week. That was great. I had a chance to listen to that, enjoyed that. And then, of course, the three of us recently completed the Blind Guardian podcast. What was that? Probably 2 weeks ago. So I think we've got a cool topic for today. We're going from like power metal to the world of death metal. So our band is Death. And the album is from 1990, Spiritual Healing Record. So classic Death album. As always, we're going to discuss the album, the tracks, some other interesting points. Then we'll come back towards the end and rank the Death catalog. So before we do that, just going to give a bit of history about Death. And, just such an influential band that I've tried to narrow it down to the Cole's version because there's a lot to say here. But of course, Death was formed in Florida in the mid-1980s by Chuck Schuldiner. And of course, Chuck is the lead songwriter, vocalist, and guitar player, and largely single-handedly the main guy on the first album, at least. And so when it comes to death metal, now this could be its own podcast, I'm sure, but, many will say Death is the first death metal band. Some might debate it's Possessed, but that could be a whole other podcast. From a lineup perspective, probably more than any other band, Death has had a revolving door of musicians. The good thing is Chuck is always able to bring together the absolute best talent in metal. And so, that's one reason why I personally think Death is such an amazing band, because every single musician, especially as the Death catalog progresses, you just have so much talent. And then, of course, the Death sound started as like very much raw death metal. And then, by the end, it had progressed to like full technical progressive metal. So a big change in sound. 7 studio albums, the first being Scream Bloody Gore in 1987. Right after Death, the last Death album, Chuck had formed Control Denied. That was very much his interest in wanting to step away from the borders or the boundaries of Death. He didn't want the death metal vocals anymore. He wanted to step away. So that's where Control Denied started. And then, very sadly, Chuck passed away in 2001 from brain cancer. And then we're all left wondering, obviously, where would have Chuck's amazing music went? What direction had he lived longer? So sadly, we'll never know. So that's kind of, I think, gives a quick overview. Anything, Jim, Ken, you'd want to add in terms of history around Death?
No, I think you got it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ken.
Cool. No, I was just my only point was that there was a time when he did come to Toronto to play with Slaughter. Remember at the early beginning of Death. Remember that he actually Dave Houston invited him to come to Toronto to play. So he actually did migrate for a brief time from Florida to Toronto to play with Death, but he didn't enjoy the experience. And then
I forgot about it. It lasted what, like something like a month or a couple weeks?
Yeah, like very, very short time. And this was at the beginning, I think, when Slaughter, I think this would have been when after Scream Bloody Gore, or maybe before. I'm not quite sure. It's around 86, 87 when that happened. And then he left and went back to Florida.
Okay. I don't suppose you would. I don't even know if they played many shows. I don't suppose you saw them. Did you, Ken?
No, I didn't. I looked it up to see if there was any shows. I don't think so.
Well, maybe not.
I think it was a lot of rehearsals and demos, but then he eventually just left.
Okay. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Nice ad. Yeah, that's interesting point for sure. Okay. So with the history done, and of course, getting past the sad news of the death history, obviously, I think it makes sense to sort of let's talk about death and celebrate Chuck's music as it deserves to be. So maybe before we get into the album, let's just start with where we discovered the band Death. I'm sure we have some good stories there. Jim, how about you kick that off?
Oh yeah, it was probably late, like 89 for the Leprosy album that was released in 88. I mean, like I've talked about this many times. You go into the young people today don't have that adrenaline rush of record releases and going into the record store on a weekly basis and seeing these cool cover art that you generally haven't really heard the music before, because you didn't just look it up on your phone. You had no phone, or you had no internet or anything like that. So you walk in and you see that album cover, Leprosy, and I was like, okay, I'm buying that. And took it home, and it was amazing. And went back and got Scream Bloody Gore on cassette. I still have my cassette. And then since that cemented me as a fan. And with the death metal sound, I think, like I'm a huge thrash and death metal enthusiast, as well as traditional power metal and that. But these two genres really, really speak to me. And I'm a huge Obituary fan. I think, I would have picked up Slowly We Rot not long or around that time. And, it's just, I mean, those bands are awesome. And the Floridian death metal, I kind of call it even a movement, because it seems to be where the birthplace of a lot of these bands come from. You have Hellwitch from down there. You've got a really big, Cannibal Corpse. You've got a huge group of death metal artists. So I mean, it's definitely this Floridian sound that has come through, and now you get to enjoy it. In all, there's German death metal bands, there's Swedish, there's Norwegian, there's all kinds. So it's, and they still have hints of those early pioneers in there, as well as you brought up, Possessed as well, with, I think it was Seven Churches was the one that everybody debates which one was the first one. But for me, definitely Leprosy, and, awesome album.
Cool. Ken?
Yeah, same here. Like Jim, the visual aspect of the band is what I got into first. So back in the late 80s, I was actually going to art school. So I started art school here in Toronto, Ontario College of Art. So you start seeing all the art. So I used to go to the Record Peddler, and that's where I first discovered Death. Like Scream Bloody Gore was the first album I actually seen. I saw that vinyl cover, and it was like, holy cow! It blew me away. I bought the cassettes, and it started for me. I was always buying cassettes back then, and it just basically led from there. So like I'd go into Record Peddler, wait for the next Death album to come out, and lo and behold, there it was. And you're all in your kind of gory, bloody glory with all this kind of stuff. So for me, it's always been the art. Ed Repka is such a great artist. I love all the death and thrash albums that he illustrated back in the day. I mean, I always associated like art and metal and horror movies all in the same kind of melting pot for me. So that's always been my association with Death, and every album has just been an experience, like from the get-go.
Yeah, no, I mean, mine's the same thing, right? Like walk into the record store, there's Scream Bloody Gore sitting on the vinyl rack. I mean, what young sort of teenager wouldn't be drawn to that, right? So
Yeah.
pick it up, pay for it, bring it home. Wow, this is cool. Like for me, it was my first sort of experience with death metal for sure. And then grew to love, because, some of my other favorites like Obituary and Morbid Angel were more like 89, right? So they came like a couple, few years after. But yeah, that, I was going to mention that the Ed Repka artwork. And I always wondered why they stopped using them after 3 albums, right? Because he did Leprosy, Scream, and Spiritual Healing. And then that was it. And maybe it was just because they were switching to progressive. They wanted, with Human, they wanted something new.
I think that's it.
I miss Ed's artwork.
I think that's it. You're right. I think you can see the music was changing from just typical kind of thrashy death to more like progressive tech death metal. So I think that the album covers later on very much show that they were making that change. I see that you got them behind you in your setup there, Billy.
Yeah, I'm looking at them to refresh my memory.
Because I know he handpicked the artist for Human.
Oh, he did?
Yes, he did. And he handpicked the artist for Symbolic for both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And
so they were obscure artists.
Perseverance is pretty cool, the artwork too.
Yeah, that's different. But yeah, he actually handpicked those artists that we're talking about for Human and Symbolic. They were more obscure artists, but whatever. Like,
yeah, I know. Okay, cool. No, sounds good. Okay, so yeah, we pretty much 3 people with the same experience. I guess maybe not a surprise. We're 3 50-year-old approximately males who love heavy metal to this day. So maybe no surprise there.
Nope.
Okay, cool. So let's deep dive into this great album, Spiritual Healing. I always found it interesting just before we go, when I'm at shows or like talking with people. I mean, people are generally, I find, a fan of the first 2 albums or the later albums. People often love Spiritual Healing or they don't like it. Like it just, views are so mixed. But I mean, so we'll rank it and see where we put it. But I just find people are so divided on the best death album.
Yep. Okay.
I
can see that.
But you know what? I mean, I don't think Death has ever made a bad album, to be honest.
No,
somebody says they like these 3 and someone else says they like those 3. I love all those 6. So
exactly.
Yeah,
fair enough.
For sure. So let's talk about the first song on Spiritual Healing, Living Monstrosity. How about Ken? You want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. This is a really good song for an opener. What I like about this is that, it's in-depth lyrics. So you're getting something that's a much more stronger palette for him, for Chuck. And the other big thing that you're going to get off the bat is because you have James Murphy, you're going to get a lot of great melodic leads. You're going to get a lot of progressive guitars. It's going to be a lot heavier sounding than you would have got with Leprosy and when they had Rick Ross. So obviously when they fired Rick and then they brought in James, there's a big change in the sound right from the get-go. Yeah. So you start moving away from the verse chorus of the first 2 albums, of the first album for sure. And then you start going into this like test deck guitar driven sound. And I love this song. This song is so great because you get James, he's going down with the fast riffs there at the beginning, the breakdown right in the middle of the song. And what's great about this song too, for me, is not just the music, but the lyrics. Like basically it's about cocaine and about he's waxing on the idea of like people who have that habit giving birth to children who then kind of carry on that legacy of having cocaine or being hooked on cocaine. So it's such a great, for a death metal song, and it's interesting because it's like you didn't hear too many death metal albums starting out with those kind of lyrics, socially charged lyrics for the time, but it's a great opener.
Yeah. Jim, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, this album, I think it's funny because people, you're right, Ken, when you and Billy, when you say a lot of people have mixed reviews on this album. I mean, Human came out a year later and then they had changed. I feel this was more of a maturing phase because
Mm.
remember, like Chuck started when he was 16. So, like when his first project, and then boom, it's like, you got Scream, and then you've got Leprosy, and then you've got this. And I agree with what Ken said, where, and I get the feeling it's a little bit more maturing. So this album here has a lot of what I thought, reading a lot of the lyrics in that, of the kind of the social news issues of the time. And it's very kind of, in a weird way, like Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire" towards the end of that song, where they was heading into, the 80s and that, and he was explaining, and it was getting more and more depressing because it was mostly wars and drug abuse and stuff, all that stuff. When he was listing it off, it's kind of like that because this album, every song on it has that sort of message with it. And yeah, as Ken said, this is, addicted parents having babies born with addiction, and it's a living monstrosity. I mean, it's got great the vocals are awesome. It really mature sounding. I think it's got, I mean, the song itself just kicks ass. I mean, that it's got a really good punk groove to it. That guitar riff is amazing. It's chugging. And I mean, this is an awesome, what a way to start off an album. But the message in there is really, really good. And every song, there's pretty much a message in it, including the cover of the album gives some of it away. So, it's pretty cool. No, I love that song. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Um, and for me, I think like the first thing that comes to that hits me is kind of Chuck's vocal approach, right? Like
Yeah.
he's,
Yeah.
one, you can understand him like quite clearly, which is good because he's got something to say, right? As you and Ken were just talking about. So there's something, he's got some cool lyrics here. So let's hear him. And he's actually on the verge of singing, as opposed to sort of doing more growling type thing. So I think that's for me that's a big part of why I like this album, maybe better than the first two. I think the production is a bit more mature and cleaner.
Yeah.
The and as always for Death, right? Like it's all about the riffs, right? Like Chuck's riffs, like his ability to sort of, they're so hooky. They just go out and grab you, right? Like, many, death metal bands is, oh, there's one good hook there in that song. But like you got hooks all over the place in these songs. And again, no disrespect to Rick Ross. He was I'm sure the right guy at that time, but putting James in, definitely an upgrade in the guitar. And again, I think like Bill Andrews does a great job on the kit, right? Like it's interesting drumming. He's doing a really good job. And then just sort of a little stat I'll throw out there from a live perspective. This is actually their most played song live on this album. Although it barely makes the Death top 10, but it's the most played death song from Spiritual Healing.
Wow.
The top 1, 2, 3 songs live are sort of coming from the first two albums.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, great. So next up we have Altering the Future. Jim, how about you on this one?
Yeah, this is another cool song. I mean, the whole album, this is one of my favorite Death albums. I like it. I like the I like the writing in it. It's really good. I mean, I love the first couple, but this is an amazing album. Altering the Future has a wicked drum line in it. I love the change ups in it. It's awesome. I think this is more of reflective again of something of the time, which really hasn't gone away, but it's more reflective of maybe an abortion issue, altering life, somebody born into a troubled life. What do we do to fix it, or do we fix it right from the start, or whatever? I think it's got it. That's what I get out of it. But it's really like, again, you're in song 2 here, another just ripper of a song, and it's got a really cool message. You know, it's safe to say too, in his eulogy for Chuck, it was written that he's a lover of life, friendship, and animals. And you know, I think it's good to say that this guy wasn't, you know, like everybody thought, okay, the band Death, holy cow, and then we have Death, and you know, and these guys are, I mean, these are just regular guys who love everything that everybody else does. They just have, just like us, we like their heavy music, and I think it's got a great message. And you know, this album, like I say, every song on it's got a really cool message and story to it.
Yeah, no, well said. Ken, how about you?
Yeah, I think the vocals, you mentioned it, Billy, like the vocals are very shrill. They're very deep sounding. And what I like about it is that there is a lot more clarity with the style. So you do hear the words. What I do notice on the songs, and you'll all through the tracks, he'll have a very shrill scream that accentuates maybe a phrase, or it falls with a phrase. And I've noticed it, and it really brings those lyrics to the forefront. And that's what I love about this album. I think this is why it's my favorite Death album. It's just because it's the way he handles those screams. That scream is just chilling, but it works. It works for the song. And I don't think I've heard of any death metal vocalist at the time singing in that style. And that's what I've noticed about this album. And that's the one thing I do love about this song in particular as well.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, another great song on the album. You know, you may have been alluding to this, Jim, but like for me, the best parts of each song is actually, you know, repeats itself in all the songs.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to maybe sound a bit repetitive here, but you know, again, just you know, it's about the maturity of Chuck's songwriting. You know, it's obviously progressed. Like his ability to introduce the riffs in the song and then to change the riffs throughout is just, I mean, second to none at the time. Like the riffs are all so strong, and you know, like with this, there's just this driving, this underlying driving force in the music that just propels it forward. Like I think it's really great. And I don't remember, maybe Ken, you mentioned this, but I think it's just, in you know, this is probably James Murphy, but you know, just the solos are just melodic, right? Like it just when you've got like an angry vocal lines, and then you get this like melodic solo, like I think it's really cool. And I remember seeing an interview with James Murphy, and he kind of, you know, he talked about, you know, like that's one of the reasons Chuck liked him, was he could do that. And then he was saying later on, like the Carcass guys told him, like this album and the melodic solos was a huge influence to them. And we all know Carcass ended up, you know, utilizing a lot of like melodic riffs and solos through their career. So kind of interesting point there.
Well, James actually wrote tracks for 4, 6, 7, and 8. He actually co-wrote those songs. Yeah. So like you can see the heart of the order where the meat of the songs really show on those tracks. So it's great that everyone really contributed. Wasn't just Chuck writing it all. Everyone had a part in this album.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Did Terry have any writing credits?
Yeah, Terry did. He wrote, what did he write now? I know I'd actually wrote this down because I thought it was quite interesting. But he wrote 4 or 5 songs. So everyone really contributed from as far as I know, from what I could see on the album.
Okay. I mean, I love Terry on bass. I think he's fantastic. Like, I don't know if this is just me or maybe, you know, my years over the age, but that's my only issue. I think the mix is good and the production is good, but I find Terry like very low in the mix. Like a couple of songs I can pull him out, but in most of them he's lost in there.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the criticism with Scott Burns. Is that the drums, some say that Bill Andrews' drums is too repetitive, and also people were saying that the bass is too low in the mix. But I don't really get that when I listen to it. I love the drumming. The drumming is great. It's really progressive and fast. And I don't have a problem with Terry Butler as a bassist. But yeah, that's what the one thing I was reading online. People were criticizing that for Scott Burns, which is weird.
Also the remix, like the remasters, they've cleaned it up a little bit from the original pressing. So you do get a little bit more on there because they do. I think, and this album has the demos as well on it for the remaster, and it does stand out a little bit better. But yeah, you guys are 100% right. I don't know. I wonder if it was around the time era that bass was just kind of maybe pushed off a little bit, because it seems like there's a few albums, Justice is one, like
well, there's the famous one.
Yeah.
But it's funny, like within the first 30 seconds of the Human album, the bass has been fixed.
Yeah.
Because it's like right up there at the forefront, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, track number 3, Defensive Personalities. Ken, how about you start this time?
Yeah, this is a pretty good song. It's a bit more straightforward. So it's basically it's got a more thrashing speed to it. And I know people were saying it kind of sort of reminds you of the first album with that kind of thrashy death style, which I like the song. Yeah. It chugs right from the start and it goes through. And I think the lyrics are funny because he's trying to wax with the idea of someone living with multiple personalities. And if you listen to the lyrics, he's trying to break it down into 3 separate, like a person born with multiple personalities. They have 3 separate personalities. So I think it's a fascinating song, a bit straightforward. It's not as I don't think the playback there is much for me. I like the song. But it's probably the most straightforward song on the album, I think.
Yeah. Jim, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I like the song as well. What I love about Chuck, this guy's a perfectionist. This guy was a perfectionist. And I think, he takes something so basic as I agree with Ken, a very, very straightforward, basic song. And just, he creates something really, really cool with it. And, and I think that's probably why there was kind of a revolving door of band members throughout the years, because he is a perfectionist and he wanted to put out the best possible. And, this song's definitely evidence that you can take something basic and just turning it into something really cool. The guitars in it are amazing. I love how it slows up a bit and then just takes off. And, the multiple personality disorder, again, another topic that, like on a lot of the albums that we've talked about, earlier in some of our earlier podcasts, the 3 of us even talking about, a lot of the stuff with, Testament has written about it, and it's been kind of a focal point for a lot of metal bands. So I think it should have been probably maybe a little bit more lyrically longer, but other than that, I like it's a good song as well too. It's it's probably middle of the pack, but still a top-notch song.
Yeah, no, I think you guys hit on it. I don't think I have too much to add. It's actually it's played live very rarely, just a handful of times, probably during the actual spiritual healing tour would be my guess. I think you guys nailed it. The only other thing I would note is it's a pretty catchy chorus on this one, right? It kind of sticks with you. But and the other thing that stands out for me, but Ken already hit on it. It's a pretty thrashy tune, which is cool. Mixes it up a little bit. Okay. Next up, Within the Mind. Jim, how about you?
Yeah, this is another cool song. It's got a great guitar solo right at the end of the track, just about to the end of the track, which is really, really cool. And I like the fact that the lyrics, and that he's not overdoing it on a lot of lyrics, but the song is made up of really good lyrical content, good chorus, and then bam, you've got a lot of good musicianship in there as well. And this is a song about, in my mind, tackling self-doubt, dissecting your mind, essentially not letting you overthink situations, and maybe lending yourself more to your ability rather than letting your mind kind of take over, trusting your gut, stuff like that. I think that's pretty cool. And, again, another top topic of metal bands from the time, anything that kind of realms around that. But a great song. Again, too, the drums are really prevalent in it. And yes, still is that sort of kind of bass. You don't really hear the bass is tough on this. The remaster is a little bit better, but a great track. I mean, I like it. It's not a bad track on this album in my mind.
Yep. Over to you, Ken.
Yeah, it's probably the heaviest song I think on the album, and it's right at the middle, it's at the middle, the track 4. So it's like heavy as hell.
Yeah.
That's what I like about it. The riffs are great, so it doesn't let up. It's one of those songs that, to me, it's just the drumming, the guitar, everything like falls into place at the right time, and it's really strong. Again, the lyrics, as you mentioned, Jeff, are great. Like, you're training your mind to get past all your inhibitions about your past, the darkness, whatever you've got going on in your head. You're trying to get past that to get to something that's more, I don't know, idyllic, to say, for lack of a better word, but I would think that's what I like about that song. It's a great song. There's no problem. It's also the first song that James Murphy contributed writing, so you could hear it in the song. I love it. It's a great song.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of my favorites. The second most played live song from this album, kind of probably the 13th most played Death song live. So fairly common set. And I agree with you, Ken. Like super heavy, that like excellent slow grinding riff that kicks off the song. It's fantastic. And you even like Chuck vocal wise, like he's sort of dipping into his vocal toolbox, if you will, and he's got some pretty good like guttural screams on this one, which are pretty effective, I think. And then just again sprinkling the little bits of melody here and there, just make those heavier parts so much cooler. But yeah, another great death track. Okay, so next up we have the title track and the longest song on the album, approaching like 8 minutes, almost 7:45. So Ken, how about you kick us off this time?
Yeah, I like the song a lot. I mean, a lot of people note right at the beginning the fast tremolo picking, the tapping right at the beginning of the song, and it kind of leads into this great piece of writing. And I think the lyrics is what really hits home for me about like you practice. And it's not unlike a Testament song, because I know they've covered this same topic about practice what you preach. There's a lot of just if you're a religious whatever religion you worship, you don't practice what you preach. So it's great in that regards. About 3 minutes in, though, there's got this incredible scream. And again, he accentuates that lyric, practice what you preach. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
For me as a listener, it just grabs you. It just pulls you into the song, and you follow it through. It's a fantastic song for me, right from the get-go. And I think the guitar playing is a masterstroke here. It's just so great. And then you get the drumming with Bill Andrews in the last 2 minutes. He just like takes the song and just basically brings it all in. I've read online that there are a few people who think the song could be trimmed down a couple of minutes, but I don't know. I like the length. I like the fact that everyone contributes and everyone has a part in creating that song.
Yeah, no, well said. Like literally, I've got pretty much the same kind of points jotted down. Even going down to I have like 2 memorable Chuck vocal lines, and one you hit on, the practice what you preach.
Yeah.
But the other one where he's like, speak no more lies, it's your time to die. It's just such a great part. And then the riffs that come after it, just really memorable there. Chuck's pretty diverse on his vocals, the solos, the drumming. It's heavy, it's groovy. It's actually my favorite track on the album. So I love it. And the third most played live song off the album. So great one. And then Jim, how about you?
Oh yeah, I mean, you guys I wrote down, practice what you preach. Your loved
All
one
three
is
of
now
us.
deceased. Knowledge is at our hands, never to understand. I think that's great. I think this song and song 6 kind of go together as a package. And I mean, I love that intro. This is probably the most recognizable from an intro Death song that there probably is. I mean, that is so cool. And the crunching guitars, I mean, you guys hit it on the head, on the head. And I mean, killing for your religion. They're talking about everything, people not following, everything from TV evangelists to, and then the next song kind of flows into that too. But yeah, this is one of the best songs and probably one of my top 10 songs from Death. So, I mean, it's just phenomenal. I love it. But yeah, we all hit that same, and when he yells practice, that is wicked. And he does that in a couple of songs with the like the one we spoke about a couple of tracks earlier. And it's just awesome. And I love the length of the song. In fact, I wish the album, as much as I hate bloated albums, I would love a couple extra tracks on this. I think 8 tracks is probably not enough, but that's just, after listening to it so many times, I'd want to hear more. And but anyways, no, awesome track for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Jim, do you know the running time? I know it's probably fairly short, but to be honest, I don't have a clue because most of the songs are like almost 5 minutes at least.
43 minutes and 17 seconds. So right around that album of the early 90s, late 80s, right around that time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess they could have built 1 or 2. I wouldn't have complained.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, we have track number 6, Low Life. Ken, you want to run with this one?
Yeah, this is a pretty good song too. Again, we're going to repeat ourselves, but he has that line which I totally love, where it's like a pathetic excuse for a human being. I love it because he slows down, and it's shrill. The voice is so shrill, and it's like, man, he's really spitting this out. It's almost like the way he sings on the album is like he deliberately knows who he's pointing it out. Like, this is my lyric, this is who I'm talking about. We don't know, but you get that drift, like, you're a pathetic piece of a human being. It's like, I love it. It's like he's just basically spitting out social lyrics, and it's so damn good. I love this song. This song is great too for me. It's a great song overall. A little bit of groove to it, but it's still a pretty damn good song.
Yeah, and it's such a nice a change versus singing about like zombies and open caskets, and like it's such a step up. I think, again, no disrespect to the lyrics on the old stuff, but okay, Jim, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, this is awesome. Another great intro on this song. The Leeches of Society, I love it. So it could have a couple of meanings. You could look at it from just anybody being a liar in your life, to being fake, to being taking advantage, to, and then, the cover of the album, like spiritual healing and low life. I find these two go together. And that's exactly what was going on around that time with all the TV evangelists, the spiritual healing. We all know where that they all ended up, So, but it's a great song, and another sign of the times of what was going on, and just a really good gut punch of a song. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I think you guys said it all. The only thing I'd add, though, is the best part of this song for me is like somewhere towards the middle. You just have this, like, you have Chuck and James just trading solos. It's like one after another. Like it just, every time I listen to it, I can't wipe the smile off my face. It's my favorite part of the track. It's probably where they let loose the longest and the most on the entire album.
Yeah, and just the ending part as well, that vocal scream right at the end. I love that. You will ever be, and it's like, you'll be a low life forever. I love the ending. That ending scream is what a way to end a song.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so sounds good. Genetic Reconstruction. Jim, how about you?
Oh man, this is another wicked song, and
what a surprise!
I know, and I always love to throw something Star Warsy in there. This is exactly it. This is technology replacing natural, and it's about cloning, and I think it's another sign of the times of what was going on. You've got Star Wars Attack of the Clones. I mean, they want to create Mind Without Emotion. I think it's awesome. And but I mean, the song is amazing. Again, I can keep going on about how great the guitars are, and his vocals are amazing on this song. It's another great one, and we're nearing the end of the album, so this thing just doesn't let up. I mean, there's not a, usually you get to that mid-album by the fourth or fifth song where you're kind of like, okay, and let's get on with the show here. You don't want this to end, and I definitely didn't. It's awesome, love it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Ken?
Yeah, the thing about the lyrics here, though, for me is that it's obviously written at a time when, Terminator, Terminator 2 were big. So it's got a very kind of fantasy vibe to it, which I kind of like. It's a bit of a fresh take and not just always about social commentary. So it's a really good song. Mind you, though, this song is very topical because he's discussing the idea that humans are being replaced by machines. And you could pretty much apply that to like today's standards, because it's kind of what we're seeing around us in the world today. So it's a song that still rings through. And the other thing I like about it, from my other one point, is that I love the hateful kind of low to high growl. It works really well in this song. He's by this time he's perfected that so much that it's like I can't envision this album without that style of singing on this album. It just, if he just took a very kind of Cookie Monster style growl, this record would blow. I'm sorry, it would just blow for me. But,
I agree.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I agree. Like the lyrical content, like as I was listening to it, this week, the album, looking at the lyrics, like, I mean, very relevant to today's world for sure. And I mean, Chuck just has an awesome scream on this one. Like I went back to look, it's like right at the 3.5 minute mark. Really good. Just, and again, we're sounding repetitive. Another strong song filled with hooks, and it's just really catchy as well, for which is great for a death metal song to have those features. Sadly we come to the final track, Killing Spree. Ken, you want to go on this one?
Yeah, sure. So this is another one of those kind of straightforward, speedy, kind of thrashy death songs, which is good. I don't have a problem with it. It's an amusing song because I'm almost at this point wondering lyrically, because basically he's saying here that, well, this guy's bored. He's bored with life, and he decides he's going to go on a killing spree just to amuse himself. So I'm almost wondering if he's actually trying to poke fun at just, I'm going to write this song, and why not? Because I think in the 80s, like the idea of the serial killer was becoming a pop cultural phenomenon. So kind of like he's poking fun at that. But the song is really strong. I think it ends on a really good note. It's fast, it's speedy, it's got a really death thrash style to it. I don't think I have anything bad to say about it. It's just a way to end the album off on a good note.
Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, it's an ass kicker of a song, and it's the shortest song on the album at just over 4 minutes and 16 seconds. But I mean, it's awesome, and I agree. Death song for sure, and very basic, and I love it. And I think Ken's right. I think he's maybe just saying, like, I always wondered how he wrote this album, because there's so many different topics on it that, I'd like to see what maybe didn't make the album, or I'd love to hear if there was anything that didn't make the album, because it kind of covers pretty much everything there, and there's nothing more relevant than that today. I mean, we hear about this all the time on the news and that, but I think it was the change too, like as Ken was saying, from the serial killer to now sort of more of a killing spree, mass shooting type thing, which it's kind of weird that we're listening to this from so many years ago, and many of these songs have so much relevancy today. But great way to end off the album. Like I said before, I think the album could have gone at least one more song, maybe two. You can get the bonus material on the re-release where they have, I think about 10 or 12 demos and stuff on there, and it's really, really cool. But it just ends off the album in style.
Yeah, no, yeah, well said. And the killing spree, I totally agree. Like every time I listen to this song, like I think about the mass shootings, and having lived in the U.S. for almost a decade recently, I mean, you turn on the news and it's always there, and so yeah, this song to me, brings me to those moments, which are incredibly relevant for today. Again, as I was re-listening to this, is a bit of a story, but when I lived in Philadelphia, and this is probably going back about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. I was at a Dying Fetus Frozen Soul concert. And just as the concert was ending, it was Philadelphia on South Street. Essentially, there was a mass shooting right there. Like, we were coming
Wow.
out of the concert, and the police are escorting us like down the side and straight out, and there were like ambulances everywhere. Like, somebody just started shooting, and like 17 people got shot right there on the street. So yeah, pretty crazy. Like, as I was re-listening to this album and this song, like I kept reliving that, those 5-10 minutes of my life that are going to stick with me probably forever.
Yeah, no, that's shocking. And yeah, like, no, for sure. And that would be shocking. Geez, you're coming out of the venue and you're all metaled out from a good night of metal, and then you got to deal with that. Brutal.
Yeah,
Absolutely
yeah.
brutal.
Yeah, so slightly off
Yeah.
topic, but it just, as I was re-listening this song and looking at the lyrics, just kind of made me relive that. But okay, so enough about my stories. Time to rate the album. So where should we start, Jim? You want to go with scale 1 to 10?
Yes, I'm going to go with a 10. I love this album. I can't understand people who don't like it, or maybe they think it's one of the weaker albums. I don't know. I for me, I love it, and I think it was that changing kind of as the band was sort of morphing and growing up, and you got to do it with them. And I think that's just part of it. And I love the album. I think the writing's top notch. Musically, the album just kicks ass, and it's a great representative of the Floridian, death metal movement. And I love it. I absolutely love it.
Ken?
I think Ken might have got booted out.
Oh, okay. Maybe
he's logging back in.
Oh, you there, Ken? All right. Well, let me rank the album, and we'll see how Ken goes. So yeah, I'm gonna probably mirror you, Jim. So for me, a 10 again. It's not like any all out death metal album like the early stuff. It's not like progressive, like super progressive as the later albums. But for me, it's like the perfect mix of the two. It brings the best of the old, the best of the new. And I think, you may have said this, Jim, but it's transitional. It's all about, it was a key moment there. And again, we've been hitting this to death, but the lyrical content, just such a big leap forward. And then lastly, for me, just there's some nostalgia to it, right? Like, this time, metal is like, like if I write down all my top 50 albums, like they're all going to be like 88, 89, 90, right? Like that. There's just something about that period for me where I was like just up to my neck in like heavy metal. Cool.
Yeah, those years were formative years. And yeah, it's right, it's true too, because I think the top 50 list for the Metal Pit were all mainly from those 3 or 4 years there, and it's just everybody has such fond memories of that part of time. I mean, metal was so strong, and yeah, for sure. And I was just in high school in '89, leaving high school, and those were the years, the best years of metal and rocking out, and that was just awesome. Everything was new.
Yeah, I know. Like, and just to that point, like I remember coming to school like every day and telling my friends, "Here's the best band ever," and then like 3 days later, it was like, "No, here's the best band ever," right? Like it was just endless. But it looks like we got Ken back from his technical issues. Can you hear us okay, Ken?
Yes, I can, sir.
All right. So both I gave the album a 10. Jim
Okay.
gave the album a 10. Both of us roughly the same. A good transitional album, balances the old, the new. So over to you. What would you rank it?
Sweep 10.
There you
That's
go.
it. There's no way this album's under a 10 for me. It'll never ever be under a 10.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I could listen to this album years later and I will never change my opinion about this album. It to me it's the album that touches me the most. I would never change that opinion. It'll always be a 10. Never change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. No, agree. So once again, some group think the three of us are all on the, the same page, thinking exactly the same. Okay, so that was good. Some good conversation there. So now it comes time to rank the Death albums. So we're going to do the 7 albums. We're not going to rank the Control Denied album, The Fragile Art of Existence, but we'll come back to it and speak to it just briefly, share some thoughts on it towards the end. But yeah, so let's rank those albums. Ken, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So number 7 is going to be Sound of Perseverance. It's an album I do like a lot. It returns to kind of like that heavy progressive sound. I haven't listened to it in a long time, but I do think it's a decent album. At number 6, I'm putting Symbolic. Again, it's it's reaching towards the progressive side of their sound. It's got some solid songs on it. Some of the vocals I'm not overly keen on. At number 5, I'm putting Individual Thought Patterns, which I kind of like. I find it to be their most, I guess at that time, their most progressive sounding album. Again, it's a solid record. I like the album cover. But the album is good from start to finish. Number 4, I'm putting Scream Bloody Gore, and I know it should be at the top of the list, but it's a good like death thrash album. It's got a lot of more thrash elements than it does death. The songs are a little on the repetitive side. You get a lot of gore, a lot of horror movie references and lyrics, but it's still pretty good. At number 3, I'm putting Human. It's the start of their, I guess, the charge of their change in sound. Again, I love that album cover. A solid record from start to finish. Number 2 is going to be Leprosy. I have to go with where they started out the progressive sound in their style. Again, that album cover blows me away. It's one of my favorite album covers. And number 1 is going to be Spiritual Healing, which is the greatest death album ever in my mind.
All right, that's interesting. So I mean, just speaking. So Ken, you and I, it's almost a surprise that we both had Spiritual Healing as our number 1, because our the remaining ones couldn't be any more different.
Oh, okay.
But again, that's where it gets back to people have such different like opinions on the best death album. So before I go, Jim, how about you? You jump in there.
A lot of similarities. So number 7 is The Sound of Perseverance. I like to Bite the Pain on it. It's a good album. I mean, something has to come in 7th. It's got a cool cover of Painkiller too. I'm not a huge cover guy, but yeah, it's pretty cool. Number 6 would be for me Individual Thought Patterns. My favorite song on that would be like Trapped in a Corner. Good album. Number 5 would be Leprosy. Love Pull the Plug. Number 4, Human. Suicide Machine. That's a wicked song. Number 3, and again, Scream Bloody Gore. Again, it could be my number 1, I guess. But it's this is the album that started it all. Maybe the production and that. I mean, obviously the time. But Zombie Ritual on it, Baptized in Blood. You got some great songs on it. The whole album's awesome. Number 2 for me would be Symbolic. So that's pretty high on my list. Really love that album. My favorite song, Zero Tolerance, and I like the Thousand Eyes on it. Is a really good track. And my number 1 is this album, Spiritual Healing. So we have a 3 for 3, I believe, unless Billy, who I think let it leak, maybe that's not his top one, but yeah.
Nice.
Oh. Yeah, no, I wasn't necessarily saying that, but yeah. So let me go. But like, this is a message for our site guy who runs the site, Blake. Get ready for the hate emails that are going to come after my top 7 here. So number 7 for me is Scream Bloody Gore.
Wow.
So again, like I'll preface to say I love all death albums. It's going to come down to whether someone likes the more progressive stuff or whether someone likes the older stuff. For me, like, you know, my 2 favorite genres in thrash and death metal are on the technical side. So I just happen to prefer the technical death over the old death. But Scream, Bloody Gore, and Leprosy are amazing albums. But when they have to go against the later albums, for me personally, that's where they fall towards the bottom. So again, great, but I just prefer the technical side. So number 6, Leprosy, again, fantastic album. You know, excellent death metal. But you know, again, for me, it's I really enjoy the progressive side. Number 5 for me. Sound of Perseverance. Again, just getting further into the progressive side. And yeah, interesting point. I think many may know that, but this was originally meant to be, when Chuck wrote it, a Controlled Denied album, but it ended up going out under the Death name. So, you know, yet another new lineup kicking in there. Number 4 for me, Individual Thought Patterns. For me, my number 3 and my number 4 can constantly change. But I think, you know, it's got to be said for Individual Thought Patterns, 1993. Again, we talked about it, the talent in this band. I mean, here's Steve pulling in like Andy LaRocque from Steve. Here's I'm having a mind blank. Chuck, yeah. Here's Chuck pulling in Andy LaRocque from King Diamond. So I think that was an interesting dynamic. It worked out well. And Steve DiGiorgio's fretless bass on this thing is a monster. So just a progressive death metal classic. For me, Symbolic is my number 3. Just again, amazing progressive death metal. Then number 2, my number 2 and my number 1 is very hard, right? They could switch like next month. They could easily switch. But for me, number 2 is Human. And so it just as great as Spiritual Healing was, and the talent on that, you know, that lineup, bring in like Paul and Sean from Cynic and Steve DiGiorgio on bass, and then knock the lights out. Like the musical talent is completely off the charts on this record. Just amazing from beginning to end. It's still brutal, but like the bass lines are all over the place. Just it's a masterpiece in my opinion. And then number 1, Spiritual Healing, and a big part of this, I think, is going to be some nostalgic factor for me. It hit me like right in my main time of metal, but just I just fell in love with it. Still in love with it. We beat it to death about 10 minutes ago. So yeah, again, like no bad death album in my opinion, and I think that's incredibly rare, because every death metal band, even my favorite death metal band of all time, Obituary, has had 1 or 2 not so perfect albums, but Death has been a monster band for sure.
All right, that's cool.
Great list, guys. Wow, we were
Absolutely
pretty similar.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, we both had the same number 1, but we sort of placed the eras very differently, right? Like where I had the early and where you guys had the early, but we all hear it differently.
That's
sure.
right.
Absolutely.
Cool. And then maybe a few words around Control Denied and our thoughts on that album. Ken, anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, it was a bold direction for the band. I mean, you have to wonder, was he wanting to leave death metal behind and go into something new? I mean, when I first heard it, I didn't mind it. It took me a little bit of time to get into the idea of it with the clean vocals.
Yeah.
and you're bringing in most of the guys from Perseverance all played on it. So you're right. It's an interesting idea. It grew on me. I wasn't a fan when I first heard it, but after 2, 3 listens, I'm like, yeah, this is all right. It's certainly different for Chuck, but lyrically, it's still strong. It still shows that as a lyricist, he had that ability. He had that jam that he could equally like put on a song, and so I like it for that reason. It's not. I'll listen to it off and on. I don't listen to it all the time, but it'd be interesting to see if he remained alive, what he would have done. Would he would have gone back to Death eventually, or would he have just said, I'm done with Death. We're moving on with this new band. So yeah, we'll never know, but we do have that one album as proof that he was willing to make changes.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think you said it well. I'm a big fan of the album also. Like if I had to rank it in the overall, Death catalog, I probably would have had it a bit towards the end myself personally. But like my understanding is, Chuck basically he wanted to go in a direction without death metal vocals, and he wanted to stop singing. And so he was at the time into the Euro power metal thing. So that he had a very set thing in mind when he picked the vocalist Tim Amar to take the vocal duties there. So yeah, it's interesting. Like it's very like power metal. Like when you hear the chorus, I mean, you got a lot of intricate like guitar and bass and drumming for sure. But like the choruses are so clean and like power metal style. Like it's interesting. It's just different from Death.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add there, Jim?
Yeah, I think, and I like the fact he didn't use the Death name. I mean, I think that's a big thing. I think so many bands like this would be kind of considered an 8th album, and you're thinking about it in this career, like many bands who tweak or not even tweak, but change, in their catalog, and you can see it in many bands' catalogs. And sometimes you think, oh, that would have been probably better as maybe its own entity. And I think that this falls under that. And because it's an interesting album, it's a great album. I like it. I mean, Breaking the Broken's a wicked track on there. Believe, you've got some great songs, but yeah, it's not a Death album. And I think maybe fans of Death, Death metal and fans of Death maybe wanted to see it that way, but I'm glad it came out under Control Denied, so it's something different, and it is different. So it demands its own spot, and I think it's a great album and a great project, and I really would love to think that had things changed and he was still with us today, that he would have resurrected Death in some form again, but and do it the kind of tweak it to today's relevancy or the relevancy of when, and have it reminiscent of some of the old Scream Bloody Gore or Spiritual Healing. So, but I mean, if he continued on this path, I think this would have opened up a whole new kind of subgenre, and I think you would have seen a lot of bands like even maybe try something a little, because I mean he was a leader. He was a genre leader. He was a visionary. So very important. This album is very important in my mind.
Yeah. No, well said. Well said. Okay, so let's move on to kind of the last sort of feature. Just talk a bit about Death Live, and maybe we'll start there, and then we'll talk about some of the tribute bands, Left to Die and Death to All, and our thoughts on that. Because I mean, both of those touring tribute bands have been very active in the last couple years. But to start with, so Death with Chuck, Jim or Ken, did you guys have a chance to see them?
No,
I have not. I wish I did.
Yeah,
never. I got to see them twice, like with Chuck.
Okay.
Nice.
I wish it was more. Like in 1990, I got to see the Spiritual Healing Tour.
Oh, nice.
And that was at like this landmark. And I was living in Montreal, grew up in Montreal, at the landmark Fafoon Electric venue, which
Oh
is
yeah.
where like pretty much like every band that we all love, you know, where when they did their first tour, they stopped through there. And on this tour, they had the Texas death metal band Devastation that was opening for them. And then, like about a year and a half later, they rolled through on the Human tour, and I got to see them there in 1991. But unfortunately, that's it. Like I remember them, you know, these go. It's a long time ago. Like I remember being blown away, but like I really wish I remember more of like the intricacies of like Chuck on stage and how we interacted. Like, you know, back then I was like this young kid, and I was like surely in the mosh pit, running around like a fool. So, you know, not knowing I would never see Chuck ever again live.
Right.
So I would have liked to have remembered those pieces, but sadly I do not.
Okay.
But anyways,
Cool.
at least I could say I had that bucket list item done.
Nice. Lucky you, man.
So yeah, so I mentioned it earlier. So these tribute bands, so Left to Die and Death to All. And so for those who might not be familiar, Left to Die, you know, is Terry on bass and the original guitarist Rick Ross, Matt Harvey of Exhumed and Gruesome. And so they're currently touring, playing songs from Scream Bloody Gore and Leprosy. And then the other side is Death to All, where you've got like Gene Hoglan, Steve DiGiorgio, Bobby Keeble, and Max Phelps, who are sort of running around touring on that album. So maybe Ken, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on these tours?
Well, it's interesting because I find that both bands are doing different kind of set lists. So it's obviously Left to Die is going for more the classic late 80s death. It's Matt Harvey. He's obviously doing that. I mean, he's from Exhumed.
Yeah.
You know, he's in the Gruesome. So I mean, it's not a surprise that Matt would want to lead the charge in that style. And of course, you have Rick Ross and Terry Butler, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Death to All, I'm not as enthralled with. I've watched some live clips on YouTube, and they're obviously going for more of the progressive style. You know,
Yeah.
Gene Hoglan on drums. I mean, what does that tell you? And then, you know, Steve DiGiorgio on bass. Max Phelps is an interesting character because he sort of resembles Chuck with a lot of the vocal style. And I know he's played live in Cynic on the live sets, and I know that he's played in Obscura. They're kind of interesting. But I don't know. I'm kind of leaning more to the Left to Die. I think I prefer that because I like the fact that they're more because they were there at the start of the Legacy of Death. I kind of feel like they're honoring it a little bit better. It's just my opinion, but I mean, I've not seen either band. I've watched clips right now, both bands on tour. I mean, right now Left to Die is on a 14-city tour in the United States. And it looks like it'd be a fun show. I like Matt Harvey because he's much more passionate. I don't know, maybe it's me, but I find him a much more passionate person, and he obviously wants to honor death with Gruesome, and I actually like Gruesome for what they are. But it's I could see there might be some division for some people. Some might think one band is better at honoring the legacy than the other, but I think they both have merit for what they are.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, well said. How about you, Jim?
Yeah, I've watched some of their clips on YouTube, and it's fairly impressive. I mean, people get into the debate of cover bands and covering and stuff like that. I'm really glad they're not called Death. So that's really cool. And in my mind, as long as the estate is fine with what goes on and that sort of thing, I'm fine with it. I think it's a great, it's a great mode to get death music to younger listeners. And I think, both of them, I kind of maybe side a little bit more to Left to Die for the reasons Ken said, with it being a little bit more of the older catalog. But I got to admit, I would definitely go and check them out. It would be a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
I think you've got so many bands like Pantera kind of comes to mind a bit with obviously the touring and how successful it's been. I mean, yes, you've got some members there, but as long as it's totally cool with the estates of the members, they're definitely then I'm good with it, and I would go check them out. I definitely pay good money to go see them and just hear those songs, and you'll never be able to hear the original live again, unless it's on an album, or see them. So this would be a great substitute. And I think just spreading the genre to a younger crowd is always good, because we want metal to grow in numbers, and we want people to check out these original albums and give them the respect they definitely deserve.
Yeah. No, well said. Yeah, I pretty much agree with you guys. I was fortunate enough to see both these touring lineups a couple
Cool.
times.
Right.
Wicked.
And so a couple of things, I think you guys have said it, right? I mean, we're actually getting these are not like, strangers getting together and playing
Yeah.
songs, right? These are the actual musicians. They're all like, amongst the best metal musicians in the world,
Exactly.
in terms of like talent. So you get an amazing show. It's done very respectfully. People tell stories about Chuck. There's like screens showing like old clips of Chuck. And Jim, you hit on it, the youth, right? Like seeing all the young people at these shows, they're never going to see Chuck. But the fact that they could, sort of get to experience these Death songs live, it's just, they're amazing songs. So why not? And yeah, like I don't really have, I mean, from my ranking, I really like the progressive stuff. So enjoy Death to All. Given I was in the US for so long, got to see them. But interesting thing, Death to All, I think was actually the original one, because I actually saw them in Toronto before I moved to the US.
Oh,
It
really?
was 2012 or 13 at the Opera House, and it was just it was incredible. Not the Opera House, the Phoenix. It just completely sort of knocked my socks off. So that was the I believe the original tribute tour, and then in the last couple years it really gained momentum. But in 2013 there were some legal issues, like they were going to donate money to like a cancer foundation. There were problems, so they had to switch it to be called DTA. So they were touring around as DTA, so maybe people didn't make the connection. But yeah, that was like a legendary packed show in Toronto at the Phoenix Concert Hall. It was a fantastic show.
Wicked.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, no, cool. So yeah, I mean, I think that was a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed the chat, guys, today again. Before we close out, Jim, Ken, anything else you want to add?
Just pick up those remasters, with the extra stuff on it. It's just so awesome listening to the demos and that, and hearing it again with Chuck, and it's just so cool. Not to get all sappy, but that's what I love. I love picking those up, and no, they're awesome.
And Jim, is there unreleased material there? Like, are there songs that we've never heard, or just demo versions of existing songs?
Yeah, just demo versions of existing songs. Like that's it. I'm hoping at some point something surfaces, because something always will.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that be awesome?
Chuck must have a load of tapes in a box. Somebody has them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Anything? Any last words, Ken?
Yeah, no, just to go and appreciate Death. Any album you pick up is going to be great, whatever style you like, the thrashy Death, or if you prefer the progressive Death. I think you won't go wrong with any of their albums. So, I guess I like a certain style, but I'm open to all. Like you, Billy, there isn't one bad album in the bunch. Every album is great. They're all different kinds of players. But I like the fact that if anything, I'll leave off with this. Like Chuck was a really good, open kind of generous guy. So he would play with anyone. So he basically, he didn't have a lot of help. He did this on his own, and he basically played with a very large select group of players. And I love the fact that the legacy still lives on all these years later.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well said. So we'll leave it there. So thank you both for participating today. As we said, lots of fun. Again, special thanks to everyone out there listening to the podcast. So in terms of next week's podcast, please check it out. Usual time. We have another killer album. Some band called Iron Maiden. I've never heard of it before. With some album I've never heard, Killers, actually to be discussed. So I think that'll be another classic one for sure. Well, again, just thanks to all for listening, and we'll close this one out. And I'm sure the three of us will be reunited at some point in the future.
Yep. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Have a good night, gentlemen.
Bye-bye.